Hello, everybody. We're at the top of the hour, so I want to be sure to go ahead and get started to be respectful of everyone's time. Hello and welcome. My name is Sophie Ziegler. I'm the events coordinator at Library Juice. So glad to be here. I'm glad that you are here. I'm very, very glad to celebrate the launch of the new title, Slow Librarianship, Reflections and Practices. Before we get started, just a couple of words from me about Library Juice and all the things we have going on. We have three main arms, the first of which is Library Juice Academy, which is online professional development for librarians and paraprofessionals and archivists and all of us in the LIS ecosystem. Through Library Juice Academy, we offer courses. Most of them are 4 weeks, some are 6. They are taught asynchronously through Moodle. We offer tracks of study, certificates, as well as a la carte options. So you can choose what it is that you need to learn, what it is that our staff needs to be caught up on, all the things that maybe we didn't learn when we were in library school, all the things that we need to know as our jobs shift beneath us. The second arm of ours is Library Juice Press, which publishes books and journals that focus on the critical angles of LIS. And here we are celebrating a release from Library Juice Press. We have a very active publication schedule. We have a lot of great upcoming books. We have a very strong backlog of titles on our website. Library Juice Press is an imprint of Litwin Books, so you can find more about us at litwinbooks.com. And finally, we have Library Juice Connections, which is the arm that brings us all here today. Library Juice Connections is our attempt to build spaces and create connections, spaces for connections among all of us in the LIS community. Again, writ large, so archivists, professionals, paraprofessionals, everybody working in the field, everybody adjacent to the field. So we work with Library Juice Press to hold events with authors like we're doing today. We also work with Library Juice Academy to work with folks who teach the courses. We also do one-off standalone events for topics of interest to the library community. So should you have ideas, please do reach out and let us know. You can find more about all of that, as well as a growing backlog of recordings of our events on our website, libraryjuiceconnections.org. And now, with all of that being said, in my introduction is now over, I'm delighted to pass this off to Ashley Rosener. Ashley, it's all yours.
Greetings all. My name is Ashley Rosener, she, her pronouns, and I am the Open Education and Scholarly Communications Librarian at Grand Valley State University Libraries in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thank you all for joining us today. I am thrilled that the book Slow Librarianship, Reflections and Practices is now published, a work that had its beginnings in the summer of 2023. I first encountered the idea of slow librarianship through the work of Meredith Farkas, as many others have. Her writings on slow librarianship immediately resonated with and inspired me and connected to my previous work and interest in mindfulness. When I began to research the concept further, I found a few articles and blog posts, but I felt like there could be more. To me, the conversation around slow librarianship seemed to just be beginning. I then came across a post on Twitter asking if anyone was working on a book on slow librarianship and sharing that if not, maybe someone should. I may be misremembering the exact text of that tweet, but that comment actually planted the seed for this book. The timing was quite fortuitous as I was participating in Pimento, a peer mentoring cohort for mid-career library workers in summer 2023. And through the connections I made there, my path crossed with Meredith Farkas. With some hesitation, due to being a bit starstruck, I reached out to Meredith to ask to connect and see if she was planning on a book on the topic of slow librarianship. If not, I sought her blessing that I take on the project of editing such a book, and I am so grateful she lent her support and contributed to the book as well. I continue to find inspiration in her writings and work, and I am also eternally grateful for all of the contributing authors to this book's 23 chapters, as well as the many more who submitted chapter proposals or who have pursued this topic in their own ways. I hope this book proves to be a conversation starter and leads to the embrace of slow practices, even and especially small, in libraries. I also want to share that myself and two contributing authors to this book, Taylor Mormon and Jacqueline Frank, will be leading a 4-week course through Library Juice Academy titled Slow Librarianship Practice in Academic Libraries in September. So stay tuned to the website to learn more about that. And now I am really excited for us to hear from a selection of authors from the book today. And so without further ado, I will pass it to our first author, Brittany.
All right, good afternoon. Are folks seeing my slides? Okay. So although my chapter is the last in the book, it's the first you'll hear about today. So let me begin by telling you a bit about who I am. I'm a teacher, a librarian, a big sister. I'm a disabled, neurodivergent, chronically ill academic librarian. I'm also the co-founder and co-chair of our campus's Disability, Neurodivergence, and Chronic Illness Faculty and Staff Association. And for 13 years, I was the companion to Rupert, my heart dog. Rupert was a pug beagle mix with heart disease, arthritis, seizures, and spinal issues. He took more than 20 pills a day and had 4 specialists. Our life revolved around alarms, appointments, and compounding pharmacies. But Rupert also loved sunbathing and puzzle toys and hash browns after vet visits. I write that his lessons on the relentless rhythm of care, the constant negotiation of needs, and the interconnectedness of body, mind, and environment illuminated the paradoxes of slow living. He taught me to ask over and over, how does Rupert feel today? Somewhere along the way, I began asking myself the same question. This chapter combines personal narrative with critical analysis because we can't separate our bodies from our scholarship. As Donna Haraway reminds us, situated knowledges are about communities, not about isolated individuals. What I know of navigating vocational awe and tenure with all of you fellow librarians, I know from within my disabled, chronically ill, neurodivergent body. And it is from that situated knowledge I explore 3 paradoxes of slow librarianship. First, slow as performance and punishment. Slowness is praised as thoughtful and strategic when performed by certain bodies, but treated as deficiency when it shows up as disability. I quote a disabled academic who says, slowing down to keep up is paradoxical, but for me, it's a lived reality. That same tension lives in our institutions. Second, slow as policy and practice. We say we value work-life balance, we say we value care, but the bureaucratic systems meant to provide access become additional barriers. Access requires disclosure and paperwork as justification at the very moment when someone has the least energy to navigate it. Third, slow as politics and physicality. For many disabled people, slowness is not a lifestyle choice, but a bodily necessity. As Evans and colleagues explain, living with energy impairment involves careful calculations and pacing. Slowness begins as survival, but becomes resistance, and it begins in the body. So, this is where my vision begins to shift because I'm not dreaming of better accommodation within this system. I dream of inclusion, of access that is mutual, collective, and expected. I write slow librarianship through a disability lens isn't about accommodation within existing structures, but the transformation of those structures themselves. And such transformation is not abstract for me. It looks like crip time, like rest as resistance, like emergent strategy, and like body trust. Of course, it looks like practical choices too. Guardrails for self-care, defensive calendaring, and writing your own script when people question your boundaries. But most importantly, it looks collective. That is why I founded the Disability Plus Faculty Staff Association, because community is infrastructure, and leadership from the margins can shift institutions. Near the end of the chapter, I write, the paradoxes of slow librarianship represent opportunities, not failures, because as Cal reminds us, we need to do more than resist. We need to reimagine the world. There was a time when I didn't know how to care for a dog with heart, spine, and neurological issues, but I learned. Similarly, we all can learn how to retain and promote disabled workers. We can learn how to value different rhythms, and we can learn how to move not at the speed of trust, or not at the speed of urgency, but at the speed of trust. Rupert taught me that thriving doesn't mean normal. It means supportive, it means responsive, and it means joy in the small moments. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I would love to hear your stories, and may your own journey forth be a nice, slow-going one.
Okay, I think I'm next in the lineup. Hi, I'm Lindsay Gibb, and I'm collections librarian at the University of Toronto Scarborough in Canada. And I just wanted to say congrats to Ashley for publishing this book. I'm excited to read it and to hear from everybody else about their contributions as well today. And I'm really honored that my pitch was selected by Ashley, and happy to be here with everyone. So thanks for having me. As a collections librarian, perhaps unsurprisingly, my chapter is about collections work. The idea for this book spoke to me, and I can't recall if I knew about slow librarianship before seeing the call for this book, or if it was the call itself that alerted me to the concept. But either way, the movement was kind of newish to me, but it sounded a lot like the kind of work I was doing or trying to do. So it resonated with me and the work I was already doing around collections, taking the time to build relationships with small publishers and booksellers, getting to know and understand the motivations and intentions of creators, particularly zine makers, in order to build zine collections in academic libraries, which I truly believe you can't do without building relationships. So my chapter is about how being more thoughtful and taking our time with collections work can improve collections and their meaning to our communities, which I think sounds kind of obvious to say, but we don't always allow enough time to think about the work we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we hope the outcome will be. And by we, I kind of mean institutions and the profession, not necessarily like the individuals that I've encountered in my work. But we tend to think more about procedures and what vendors are going to fit into our idea of what's efficient and quick. So we're often not taking the time to build relationships where we need to in order to build useful and non-extractive collections. When I saw the call for chapters relating to slow librarianship, I thought of the project I was working on at the time, which involved visiting with local bookstores, building relationships with staff, engaging their interest, and working with us on regular orders. So something resembling an approval plan, but built to accommodate the bookstores and their availability, capabilities, and interests. The goal of this project was to onboard local bookstores and integrate them into our library collections landscape, which was increasingly becoming very automated. What I hoped to achieve working with booksellers was to get titles that we weren't seeing on our approval plans with large vendors who largely, in our case, are not Canadian and are not able to bring us a local perspective. Also to benefit from the expertise of booksellers in our community and put some of the acquisitions monies into the community. Increasingly, collections development at academic libraries looks like prioritizing efficiency. We're often working with vendors who provide automation, speed, pre-processing, cataloging, and that take away the need to interact with the titles and spend time thinking about what we want and what our community wants. Outside of course, when we're working on revamping the parameters for our plans with these vendors. So I asked questions in my chapter about whether speed and efficiency and prioritizing things like pre-processing and automation, basically taking some parts of collections work out of the library and making them happen externally, whether those things are really the most important things we should be thinking about when we're looking for vendors and approaching our collections work. So I wanted to see if I could build relationships with local bookstores that resembled approval plans enough to fit into what my institution seemed to want in a vendor relationship, but also allowed for some more flexibility, rather than just asking bookstores to adhere to all of our rules and workflows. And I admit that there are some obstacles to doing this work that mostly comes from expectations around speed that can't always be met by smaller vendors, which I detail in the chapter. And as I write, when talking about the assembling blocks to this kind of work, we should not hold booksellers to an unfair level of expectation based on traditional library vendors and should be open to new ways of working together. And I know that's easy to say and not always so easy to do, to get a library or an institution on board to allow for these kinds of relationships. But there are so many benefits to working with small bookstores that make the work worth it if you can do it. And I detail some of the benefits and arguments for doing this work in the chapter. The project with local bookstores really came out of my interest and previous work in working with small vendors, which has resulted in many projects to find and build relationships with publishers, small presses, independent creators, as well as local bookstores. And I detail some other projects in my chapter, both other projects of mine and ones that I found in other libraries and in the literature, including zine projects that I've done in a lot of my work around zines as well. So yeah, that's me. And thanks for having me. And I think I'm passing it to Darcy now.
Thank you. I have a couple slides, so I'm going to just share. Give me a second. All right, can you all see my slides? Excellent. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Darcy Gervasio from SUNY Purchase College in New York. And my chapter is called Slow Assessment Revisited. And it's literally been a decade in the making. This slide is actually a throwback to the first presentation I did on slow assessment with my two co-authors, Kim Detterbeck and Rebecca Oling, back in 2015. We coined this term kind of before slow librarianship was trending as a thing. And so in our chapter, we were really excited to kind of 10 years on take a reflective and theoretical approach. We examined the rise and fall of a specific slow assessment project that we did. And also we do an updated literature review that helps us redefine slow assessment for a new era. Here's like a short timeline, understanding that this journey was definitely not as linear as it is presented here. But back in 2012, my colleagues and I developed a rubric assessment of information literacy skills using senior projects that were housed in our library's online archive. We called the project the Senior Project Information Literacy Skills Assessment, or SPILSA for short. And we started this project because we really were not satisfied with the standardized tests and one-size-fits-all information literacy assessments that were being offered. We wanted something that was more authentic, that was based on real assignments and real learning. This project took a bit longer than we originally thought. It took about 3 years. We developed a rubric, we normed it, we anonymized some projects, and we read over, I think, 100 pretty lengthy senior projects and looked at their various elements to judge the information literacy skills of them. But we were able to present our progress at the ACRL conference in Portland in 2015. We were inspired by the slow food movement, and we coined the term slow assessment, which for us had an emphasis on being reflective, taking your time to get things right, rather than prioritizing a faster kind of cookie cutter assessment option, and thinking locally, leveraging local assets at our disposal. So a few years later, slow librarianship really took off. The concept expands across the LIS discourse, and it has a similar focus on reflection, sustainability, and also communities of care and collaboration, which is something the three of us, my co-authors and I, naturally were doing throughout this entire process. In between, a lot of life happened. We had children born, job titles changed, we had multiple changes in leadership in our library and at our university, but we're all still here. We got tenure. And so we decided in 2024, when we saw the call, what if we reflect on the rise and fall of this project, blind spots that we had, and we also decided to create a literature review to help us create a new definition of slow assessment informed by critical literacy and critical assessment theory. So our current concept of slow assessment draws on these 4 areas of scholarship: authentic assessment, critical pedagogy, slow librarianship, and a new emerging field of critical assessment. We relied on the ideas of Meredith Farkas, Judith Gillikers, Emily Drabinski, Karen Nicholson, Lena McCartan, and Rachel Deenan. And you'll have to read the full chapter for this one, but I kind of get to be a little theory nerd about it, so I like this section quite a bit. I invite you to read that. After our deep dive and our reflection, we came to a richer definition of slow assessment. We feel that it's really critical assessment by another name and informed by slow values. So in its essence, slow assessment is a reflective, mindful practice looking for authentic measures. It's local, collaborative, communal, and sustainable. It resists compliance culture and this cult of efficiency in higher education. It also resists what one of the authors we looked at called the one-shot mindset, where you're sort of in a one and done situation. And crucially, the purpose of slow assessment is not to prove a library's value to some external stakeholders using numbers and metrics. This was very common around the time we started our project, and a lot of us got into this trap of skills-based metrics and thinking. But we feel that a slow assessment is a more authentic way to understand and improve student learning and teaching, as well as assess all different kinds of library services. It builds in opportunities for personal and collective growth and reflection into our work life. And it's really founded on relationships with faculty, with patrons, and with our communities and each other. We do have some practical examples of slow assessment. Here's a bunch on this slide. I'm not going to go into all of them, but a big takeaway here is it's not just about information literacy and reference. We found examples of slow projects in cataloging and database analysis, ethnographic studies of library spaces, and these are some of the suggestions that we have there. So I will leave you with a final quote that really sums up what we mean by slow assessment and how grateful I am to my co-authors for being mentors and friends and working together for 15 years. So I'll read this to you and then I'll shut up. Slow assessment uses writing and conversation to slow down how we think. The aim is to build fallow time and reflection into our work life in order to provide a richer, more authentic, more nuanced picture of what libraries and librarians do. Slow assessment recognizes collaboration and mentorship as feminist ethics of care that can sustain us as colleagues and human beings long past any single project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brooke and I are going to co-present because we were co-writers. So we're going to kind of jump back and forth. But my name is Christine Jansen. I'm a research and instruction librarian at FDU.
And I'm Brooke Duffy, and I'm Director of Library Instruction at Hudson County Community College.
But at the time, we were at the same university. So we did a lot of this together. So our title is They Told Me I Was Wrong, but Didn't Tell Me Why. Slowing Down Information Literacy Lessons with Contemplation and Reflection. And what we were hearing from students in the first semester of teaching, but just even sometimes in those one-shots, is that students were told to use a citation generator, but they didn't completely understand, like, what is it creating? Why do we cite a lot of the ACRL framework information? So we we were looking to do a 3-credit information and digital literacy course, and this chapter is about the creation of that course and how we learned it, or what we learned from it. And it was really about we wanted to help prepare students for RIT 1003, which was their research writing class. So we now had the opportunity to slow the research process down. And instead of 1 to 3 research projects or 2 to 3 research projects, there's 1 research project the entire semester. So we completely slow that research process so we can really go into the framework and really explain the whys of why we cite, why do we give credit, why are there different types of sources, why would you go to one source over another source based on your information need. So it's creating the research question, creating the thesis statement, all of that. Sorry. I started talking, so of course my cat wants to come visit. So yes, so there's the slow librarianship allowed us to really stretch out the contemplation.
And something that I would add to that is that there was a small team of us at FDU that were both developing the course and teaching the first semesters of it. And as part of that process, we really formed a community of practice as instructors and really learned from one another about the teaching process. Many of us were, teaching for the first time a 3-credit course, or, had only done so once or twice before. And as part of that, we really slowed down, and we thought about our own teaching, but we also thought about our students and their learning process. So I have a little bit of a background in thinking about contemplative pedagogy, and when I saw the proposal for this chapter, I immediately thought about the interconnections between those two notions. Contemplative pedagogy, for those who may not be familiar, is an approach to teaching and learning that centers reflection, mindfulness, social connection, and awareness of lived experience. And if you're interested in doing a deeper dive into that, I would recommend checking out Contemplative Practices in Higher Education by Mirabai Bush and Daniel Barbazat, which is really, I think, the primary tome on contemplative pedagogy. And, I think something that has always been interesting to me about contemplative pedagogy is that it thinks about slowing down introspection and reflection on multiple levels. So it's not just about, slow librarianship, I think, at its core kind of thinks about our processes as librarians. And, it oftentimes touches upon different levels about the student experience, or, other, parts of our systems, and slowing those down. But contemplative pedagogy explicitly lays out these reflective practices on these multiple levels. So thinking about it in terms of the professor, the librarian, the student. And so when you do that, and when you think about these things happening on multiple levels, you start to kind of level the playing field and think about interconnections in an interesting way. So in this course, we were really interested in exploring metacognition, or thinking about your thinking. So not only that for the students, but also for that as the instructors and teaching this for the first time. So these kind of one way that we did this, and Christine will get into this more a little bit later, is about we really centered metacognitive writing prompts as part of the class. So little micro reflections as part of the course that happened throughout it to slow things down, to have students think about their own learning, the processes of their own learning, their educational background up until this point in time, who they are as people, and how that connects with their skills as information consumers or as researchers. And so we really learned a lot together. I think something else that's interesting about the connections between slow librarianship and contemplative pedagogy is that there are so many. I mean, once you get into like crit pedagogy land, everything starts to kind of marry together and you find interconnections. But other connections we saw here were whole person librarianship, care ethics, relational practice, and anti-racist pedagogy. You can really learn a lot from these different educational theories because they're really, in a sense, all about bringing your whole self into the classroom, whether that's teacher or student. So in terms of this course, I mentioned about, students as meta-literate learners and, how they use, consume, and produce information. And we also, we also ended up, incorporating or thinking about some other contemplative practices. At least some of us, we all taught it a little bit differently. One thing that I ended up doing was incorporating like a very, very light introduction to mindfulness at the very beginning of each class. And so anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Christine to go into a little bit more of the, how the course actually came into being and what we did in it.
Yeah, so as we said, there was one research project that they had to choose either an issue that exists in their future career, their current degree, or a passion project if they just wanted to look up something. And they worked on it all semester long. After the first teaching of the semester, sorry, I'm gonna jump back a second. We also applied all of this to the rules of the syllabus. So more about engagement versus just showing up to class and defining what that means. Just, the attendance policy. There's just so many policies in the syllabus itself that we tried to be that line of being flexible but having boundaries so we can help prepare them for, their future careers, that boundaries are important, but flexibility that, stuff does happen. So if you communicate with us, we can then make exceptions for you. And then the community practice we called InTech Chats, where we met once every 3 weeks, everyone who was teaching it. So we'd work on it together over the summer. We meet every 3 weeks to just check in to see, oh, wait, because we use a lot of open source materials. So all of a sudden something will change with that open source material mid-course and you're like, oh, pivot. What are we going to do? So we have this community practice that we work with each other. We're also constantly sharing new concepts. And so after that first semester of teaching, we're like, ooh, this is what went really well. This is some areas for improvement. So definitely we had to figure out where do we need to slow down even more and where can we speed up a little bit more, which we had spent a lot of time on making that final project. And we realized we just really needed to go deeper into the research concepts. And within a few weeks, they can make the project. They don't need a month to make that final project. So just again, with that flexibility, and then every summer and every winter, we come back together, do any major changes that need to be done. So that's been really helpful to have this group that you don't feel like a standalone, and you always have someone that a peer that you can ask that's also teaching it if you have any questions. One of the biggest works that was in there that was really influential was high school to college transition. Are they research ready? So after reading that and doing some other research, that really helped to influence that component of not just the point and click skills, but to also do critical thinking skills and metacognition. Okay, so I know we're running out of time. I'm going to put it back to Brooke.
Okay. So some of the takeaways that we outlined in the chapter are, things that we recommend if you're doing a 3-credit course, but you can also incorporate these into one-shot instruction. So we recommend, focusing on research as inquiry and critical thinking skills throughout the course, not just, around research assignments, but embed those skills throughout the course and that critical thinking. Have students assess their own preparedness. So thinking about their own digital literacy skills, their own skills in terms of thinking about research. As Christine mentioned, remaining flexible in your own teaching and constantly assessing where students are throughout the semester. Offer students opportunities to self-select areas of interest throughout the course, whether they're research topics or technology skills that they want to practice building. And, you know, I think really, really important is just remaining flexible in applying course policies, remembering that students are whole people, and temper this by, clearly communicating your own boundaries as an instructor. At a certain point, the semester is going to end and you're going to have to grade stuff. So, maybe accepting late work, but saying, after a certain date, we unfortunately have to, say no more late work because we do have to give you a grade. So anyway, I think we're running out of time, but yeah, I don't know if Christine, if you had any last words, but
Nope, I think you summed it up great. Thank you.
okay. Yeah.
All right. That was great. Thank you. I'm SD Pope. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my chapter in this wonderful edited volume. It's been a wonderful experience to hear everybody's descriptions of their chapters, and I feel like there's such resonance with what I wrote about, which is really looking at the act of reflective practice and how it relates to slow librarianship. So a few folks have mentioned this already. So before I get into that, I'll just say where am I coming from? So SD Pope, she, her pronouns. I work for Dartmouth Libraries, and I'm the head of our library technology team. And so I'm coming at this from the perspective of my own personal experience with reflective practice, but also as a supervisor, a team leader, as somebody who's on projects with a lot of different folks, and the value that I've found in reflective practice. And I will say, I've heard that word used a number of times already. I think it's really exciting to hear it called out in the context of slow librarianship specifically. I have been a journaler all of my life, and I'm not necessarily saying you have to be a journaler to do reflective practice, but during a doctoral program, we were given some guidance to try out professional reflective practice. So I started keeping a work journal that I do roughly once a week, but sometimes less frequently than that. And then I also have, in addition to the weekly journal, which is a place where I can just capture thoughts or notes about what's going on, whatever I feel like I need to write down. I also have a specific type of entry I will do as needed called a frustration log. And in this version of my journal, I have a prompt for myself where I say, what's frustrating? What was I expecting from other people? What was I expecting from myself? And I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience where you've been in the moment, reacted to something, and shot off an email or drafted an email and then said, I'll let it sit in the drafts folder. I have fortunately learned to draft things and get it out before I follow up. And I think honestly, the act of giving yourself a personal tool for that reflection in the moment, and having a regular practice of it, so it's something you think of doing when you do find yourself in that reactive mode. For me, at least, it's been wonderful. And so I wanted to write a little bit about this in the context of slow librarianship, because I feel like they're so closely aligned. And yeah, the sleep on it, absolutely. I see that in the comment. So what I wanted to do with the chapter was basically talk a little bit about what I just described to you, the practice and some of the tools for that practice, and also talk about how it's not only like where I see the alignment with slow librarianship. I feel like first and foremost that time to react is really important, but I also feel like
it is a great tool for thinking about how other people might think or getting a sense of other people's perspectives. It helps you have an empathy-driven approach to your work. And even for me, like thinking about that frustration log, a lot of times what I'll end up doing is say, what would my boss, what did I think I need from my boss, or what did I need, or what did I need from this person I was collaborating with? And it gives me a chance to try and put on their perspective for a few minutes. So that's one aspect of it. I feel like the alignment with Slow Librarianship, it centers people. It really puts you as an individual and thinking about your own professional practice as well as your collaborators. And I want to say too, I think when I was doing my literature review of what's been written on the practice of reflection, there is a lot more in pedagogy and kind of working with students and working with teaching, maybe a little less with more working internally, but it's been nice to hear what people are sharing today. But I think that's really important in the collaborative work we do in libraries. It also helps to leverage the expertise of those involved in the work by the act of, in addition to individual reflection, building that group reflection into your work. So building in those points of saying, let's hear what other people think. And I know that that can be very difficult. It's very hard sometimes to really make that space. We do feel frantic a lot of the time. We do have very, evolving, changing environments that we're working in. But it's even more important, I think, in the environment we're all in. One of the things that I had some of my own kind of debate with the literature from Julia Glassman and Meredith Farkas involved the concept of innovation and whether innovation is a good or bad thing. And I wanted to make a case for a different type of understanding of innovation, which is really the fact that we are in these complex changing environments. And we think of innovation as like doing the next cool thing and like pushing hard and fast and like not caring about people. But I want to reclaim that term as something that we are in a changing environment, and being able to adapt and bring the strengths of our communities and the people that we're working with, that expertise, leveraging it. So that was something that I felt like was a conversation I had with some of the literature in my chapter. I did want to share like one just broad theme from what I was writing about, that I feel like combining reflective practices with empathy-driven inquiry that's characteristic of slow librarianship. It can be that way to reclaim innovative practice, not for the sake of doing something new, but in support of authentic, deep listening and care in solving complex problems. And I think, at least in my work with technology, it's just getting more and more complex. So we need more reflection. I finish out the chapter with some suggestions for tools that can be used by groups in libraries or individually. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to share today. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be in this community.
Oh, I think I'm up next. That was amazing. I'm really enjoying all the book talks, the chapter talks. Clearly, I need to read the entire book. Not quickly, though, but slowly. I'm Cecilia Tellis. I'm at the University of Ottawa. I'm currently the interim associate university librarian for research services. That's a new role that I'm in. I'm here on behalf of my other co-authors. And so Sajni Lacey, Donna Langill, and Melanie Parlett-Stewart at University of Guelph. I don't have slides, and I maybe took a bit of a different approach to today's talk. I actually went back to the meeting notes for when we started writing this chapter. So it was sometime in the fall, like November 2024. And we actually took a pause. We were supposed to meet on November 6th, 2024. I'm in Canada, although most of you are in the US, you'll know what happened on November 6th, 2024. We ended up postponing that meeting. So we were trying to model our own slowing down to sort of take a moment in terms of collective grief and despair. So we did. So it was interesting to kind of look back on how the process of writing the chapter. I will say that in preparation for today, I did panic a little bit because I've been involved in a lot of talks about AI. So I'm actually the first person to mention those two letters today. I'm sorry. But I almost panicked and wanted to like stick the chapter in like Copilot and like give me a little summary for 5 minutes so I could talk about it because it's sort of rewiring my brain a little bit. But I didn't do that. So I'm just letting you know that I didn't do that. I did want to thank my colleagues, my co-authors again for inviting me to write in this chapter with them. Originally, this chapter started off as a journal article, and then morphed when this call for proposals came out, it morphed into this chapter, and they invited me to write with them, and it worked out really well. I was about to start my sabbatical year in 2025, and so it actually did really feel like a gift to be able to write with this group of librarians who I find really inspiring and who have really demonstrated what slow librarianship looks like in their work. So Sajni and Donna are earlier career librarians, and Melanie is a manager. Um, uh, Darcy was mentioning that notion of change and leadership and change in our lives, and people had children, people returned to work. I'm returning in a new role, and I've been able to sort of model and use some of the ethic of care that we've sort of mentioned in our chapter, and that idea of slowing down, particularly when it comes to DEI work. Again, recognizing that talking about DEI and EDI at this point in time is strange and weird and painful, probably for many of you in the US. We've been experiencing it differently in Canada. However, it was still important for me to take the time to write about it and how I experienced it in particular as a woman of color doing EDI work in a pandemic and the toll that it took on me. Essentially, what I wrote about was that I had asked for some time off, a 3-month leave of absence from work, well, leave with income averaging, et cetera, a type of leave that one can take here at the University of Ottawa, which I was really grateful for, to just sort of take a step back and to slow down the EDI work that we had been doing. And so what happened at my institution was that we did end up taking a pause in doing that work, reprioritized, decided that it wasn't the right time to sort of move forward on some of those things. And in writing in this chapter, it really helped to sort of solidify why those decisions were made, and that those were the right decisions. My co-authors and I did end with some call or some rules that we've sort of established for ourselves, that many of us are managers or supervisors in our teams, and so we want to model that leadership and slowing down, and that we can do that as leaders, right? And so no emailing outside of working hours, carving out time every week for self-reflection. I love that we're talking so much about self-reflection today. No emailing on vacation or sick days, like these really simple, should be simple things, but we are forced, like in our bodies, to feel like we need to rush. So that's how we listen. We ended with listening to our bodies as well. And so I think, Brittany, you sort of mentioned that as well in your chapter. So I kind of wish I had wrote a little bit more about the somatic piece of slowing down. But I just wanted to sort of cover really briefly sort of things that I talked about, and to thank my co-authors, and to thank you all for this book. We birthed a book, which is so exciting. So thank you so much.
Hello, good evening. Good evening from Europe. Good morning. And thank you for having me. I'm Stefania Mardocchi, she, her pronouns, and I'm speaking on behalf of a team of 4 colleagues who work at the Dario Nobili Library of the Italian National Research Council in Bologna, in Italy. Our team includes Silvana Mangiaracina, the head of the library, and Gabriela Carrara and Deborah Mazza. Just few information about the context. The National Research Council is the largest public research organization in Italy. And within this institution, the Dario Nobili Library is a specialized library which serves about 600 internal researchers, and it is open also to external patrons. And it is located in the city of Bologna, which is in the center north of Italy. The library focuses science. It is specialized in astrophysics, environmental science, chemistry, physics, mathematics, etc., all art, science disciplines. In our chapter, we reflect on two initiatives we launched in recent years. Both are connected to the idea of slow librarianship, in the sense that they are connected with a more human-centered approach to knowledge sharing and community engagement, and with the idea of taking the time we need to understand things and to connect with each other. The two initiatives were born after the COVID-19 pandemic. At the reopening, when we felt the need of rethinking how scientific library could reconnect with the users, the patrons, and rebuild a sense of community. Before the pandemic, the space that you can see, this is a picture on my back. The space is really beautiful, designed by a famous Italian architect, and you can see it's a round room on 3 levels. It's a very pleasant space to be, and it was used by researchers and external visitors daily. Things changed drastically after the pandemic. The library was closed for 21 months, and when we finally reopened, we quickly realized two things. First of all, people had lost the habit to come to the library. External students and citizens in general rarely came to the campus anymore, while internal researchers tended to stay in their offices or in their laboratories, continuing to use the library services only online. For the library staff, this situation created a strong feeling of isolation. Although we were back at work, we felt disconnected from the community we were supposed to serve. And we started thinking about our role and how we could rebuild meaningful connections with our community. Second thing we realized during the pandemic, there had been a lot of confusion and mistrust toward the scientific world. We realized how important it is for citizens to have direct access to reliable scientific information. We also felt that during the pandemic, everything have moved too quickly. People were constantly exposed to huge amount of information, often without the time of truly understand it. What seems to be missing was a calm space where people could slow down, reflect, and discuss. To respond to this situation, we created two initiatives aimed at bringing people back to the library and encouraging them to reconnect with the space and with each other. One is about collection development, the creation of a new collection called Science and Society, and the related reading group, which is addressed to all citizens, non-specialists. And the other one is about the organization of a series of events in the library that we called Slow Science. And so that was a very good science to be connected with this team. In our chapter, we describe how these two initiatives helped to bring life back to the library and how they helped us in rediscovering our role as librarians. But okay, in these 5 minutes, time is running very fast. So in these 5 minutes, we wanted most of all to share with you the why underpinning our activities, more than the details about initiatives. So this is basically the why. And thank you very much for having me, and I'm open to any question if you may have.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the authors. We do have a little bit of time. If anyone has a question or two, you could feel free to put it in the chat or use the Q&A feature. Feel free to address the group as a whole or an individual author, whatever works for you. I see a hand raised. I'm not sure if I can unmute an attendee or not. It looks like I might be able to, so go ahead and
Did that
speak.
work? Did that work? Okay, great. Thanks. I had a question for Brittany. And first, I just want to say thank you to everyone who wrote for this book. I'm really excited to read it. Brittany, I know you talked about the need to be on crypt time and that it's not a choice. And you might go into this more in detail in your book, but I am curious if you have any thoughts on how you are able to emphasize the need for crypt time and stay on that within these academic institutions. That is something I have struggled with consistently. And I know maybe that's like, I get asked that question too. And so it's like, maybe you're like, not this question again. But just curious if you have maybe a tip or trick or thought on that.
Sure, thank you. So, I will add that, one thing that I strive to live is, you're not behind, you're, moving at your own pace, right? And so, I say that because I was hired on at the same time as two other folks at my library. So we were on the same, permanent status track. They went up for promotion for librarian 2 and permanent status, each of those a year before I did. And part of that is because I have had 5 surgeries in the 6.5 years I've been at Towson University. And so it took me longer. And so that's one very literal way that crypt time has manifested for me. And I will also say that something I try to do is I think the way we schedule ourselves and others is super important. And so we are a Microsoft campus. We have scheduling assistant. Outlook will show when other people have a meeting. When people try to schedule me literally right in between 2 other meetings, I'm like, no. Use scheduling assistant, see that I'm busy. Why do you not want to give me any break at all? And then I look at their calendar and I see they do the exact same things to themselves, right? Especially if you are a supervisor and you have 5+ hours of meetings a day, all day, every day, and yet you want your direct reports to feel like they can reach out to you when they need support. That means you need to take control of your time and schedule yourself a little less, because otherwise I, as someone who is a very conscientious scheduler, am not going to take your only hour free for lunch, right? So it's all of us. You, as a lay person with no positional authority like myself, need to draw those boundaries, and people with power need to know that you can't overschedule yourself either, because it literally means that you won't get to connect with your employees and you aren't going to take care of yourself, and that is going to impact how you show up, whether you think it is or not. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. So we are again at the top of the hour, so we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you to everybody who could attend. Thank you, of course, to all of our authors. Thank you, Ashley, for all the work that goes into editing these volumes and getting everyone together to talk about it. Questions or comments? Please always feel free to reach out. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.